Hey everyone, welcome back. So President Trump said that he wants to send $2,000 stimulus checks to all Americans of low and middle income on this date. In today's video, we're going to be covering everything that you need to know. But before we go ahead and dive into for today, if you would like to receive up to $200 in free stock or $200 in free cash, in a pinned comment below, I will be leaving a link to Robinhood. All you have to do is once you click on that link is just sign up for a free account and then simply link your bank account. You do not even have to make an opening deposit. At that point in time, Robinhood will be sending you one free stock worth all the way up to $200. And if you'd rather just have the cash, all you have to do is once you receive the free stock is just sell it for what it's worth and then transfer the cash value right back to your bank account. Okay, so diving right into for today. So President Trump has promised to deliver $2,000 dividend stimulus checks from the tariff revenue brought in, and he's promising these checks to be delivered on this exact date. But is it the best thing for the economy? In today's video, once again, we're going to be diving into everything that you need to know. So starting out with this article here from Axios, Trump promises $2,000 tariff checks by the middle of 2026. So President Trump on Monday promised the government would pay out $2,000 tariff dividend checks starting around mid-2026. As far as why it matters, putting a timetable on the checks is a significant step forward versus just suggesting the idea, which Trump has done multiple times this year, but the dividends would require legislation. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said last weekend, and it's not clear if Congress has the appetite. As far as what they're saying, we're going to be issuing dividends later on, somewhere prior to, probably the middle of next year, a little bit later than that. Thousands of dollars for individuals of moderate income, middle income, Trump said in remarks to reporters in the Oval Office. So earlier on this year, Trump suggested $5,000 stimulus checks from the savings that Doge created. Those never ended up actually happening, but at the same time, he never really gave a timetable with these. He is saying the middle of next year, 2026. Is he just trying to buy himself some time here? Is this going to end up actually happening? Or is this just going to be like the $5,000 Doge checks that never ended up actually happening? Leave your thoughts in comments below. Do you think that Trump is serious? Or do you think this is something that is just not going to happen? Now they go on here to say that the potential cost of such a tariff dividend could be huge. So if the checks are for individual U.S. citizens and not households, even limiting to those with low and middle incomes could cost well over $200 billion. That would be more than the government collected in tariff revenue in fiscal 2025, and about half of what the government is currently pacing to collect in fiscal 2026. The fate of most of Trump's tariffs hangs in the balance, with a Supreme Court decision due in coming months on their legality. Now, promising a dividend check has become a part of Trump's efforts to frame the case in existential terms. He's recently argued that losing the case could cost the U.S. $3 trillion in refunds and lost investments, and a tariff dividend in the middle of 2026 would mean the government would be putting a huge check in most voters' pockets on the eve of the crucial midterm elections. And that is a great point there. We do have the midterms coming up next year in November 2026. This is going to be extremely important, not just for Trump, but also, of course, for Republicans as well. Because right now, in the balance, coming up in November, right now, the Republicans have the majority in the House, and they also have the majority in the Senate. It's very possible that Democrats could actually win the elections in November, and they could retake the House, and they could possibly even retake the Senate as well. And if Democrats take either the House or the Senate, that pretty much is going to kill any chances that Trump has to push any legislation that he and only Republicans like. Anything from there on out would have to be pretty much bipartisan, because Democrats would have to get on board with any bill that would pass in the House. Obviously, if they did have the majority. Right now, Republicans can pretty much do anything they want via reconciliation. But if Democrats were to say, take back the majority in the House, that would pretty much kill any momentum that Trump and the Republican Party has. And as you can see up on the screen here, his approval rating has not been really all that great, pretty much on all the issues. Immigration is now down 6.6%, trade is down 15.9%, and probably most importantly, the economy at 19.2% and 29.1%. Affordability is a big issue here, and if Americans don't believe that things are affordable. They're obviously going to pick the other side. They're going to end up siding with Democrats, or they're just not going to turn out to vote if they don't believe that Trump and Republicans are doing the best thing for their, personal economy. It's not going to look good here. Now, as far as the checks go, we have some, economists saying that, even though $2,000 checks might be very popular with the voters, they may not be the best thing for the economy. Let's go ahead and watch.
All right, let's bring in Heritage Foundation Chief Economist E.J. Antoni. We got a lot to chew on here, E.J. Let me start with tariffs, the tariff revenue. Money coming in the door, that's good for a government that's running huge deficits. The problem is the big deficits each month are bigger than the tariff revenue. So you got this talk about rebate checks, $2,000. E.J., you're the economist. Put it all together. What should the government be doing with this money?
Well, Brian, I understand the impulse here and why you want to just hand out money to people who are hurting right now. You want to provide them some relief. But we've been down this road before. When the government starts sending checks out to people where there's no tie-in, there's no incentive for working, you're not going to actually provide any relief. Sure, you get a short-term fix, kind of like a sugar high, but if you really want to provide relief to people, reduce the deficit, put that revenue towards reducing the deficit, and therefore the government's going to borrow less money. That puts less pressure on the loanable funds market, and therefore puts downward pressure on interest rates. That means people will pay less in interest on their credit cards. Mortgage interest rates go down, student loans, auto loans, you name it. That's a way to provide real relief. If you want to give any kind of tax cut kind of incentive there, then make it exactly that. Make it a tax cut, specifically something that reduces marginal rates. Create an incentive for people to work more, to work harder, and to earn more, because that will then produce more, which increases the amount of products and services available. And again, that puts downward pressure on prices. That's a formula for bringing real relief to folks.
It sounds like a very supply side recipe to the economy. But let me ask you this. If the Supreme Court rules against these tariffs, are you concerned about the economic impact of maybe having to pay that tariff revenue back?
Oh, certainly, Brian. Absolutely. And look, there's so much up in the air right now. And if you listen to the oral arguments from that case, I think it's actually pretty unclear which way the court is going to decide, because there's, I think, a decent chance that we don't get a sweeping decision. In other words, they say all of the tariffs using IEEPA are constitutional or unconstitutional. There's a really good chance, Brian, that instead we get a decision that says in certain cases, maybe like with fentanyl, the administration can use this authority, but then in other cases, perhaps it's not going to be applicable. If we look at history, though, let's not forget that after the Civil War, the income tax had been ruled unconstitutional. It was originally supposed to be a wartime measure. And then after the war, everyone said, wait a second, the emergency's gone. Why do we still have this emergency measure? So that money, however, was not refunded to folks, which means I think there might be precedent here to not refund tariff revenue in this case.
I like a little mid-19th century history to shed some light on this subject. I want to ask you about this, though, as well. So Fortune magazine being shredded online for their claim that, quote, blue-collar jobs are plunging for the first time since the pandemic. Okay, so I think you've got a little debunking to do on this. Give us the reality on blue-collar jobs.
Well, Brian, this is just absolute nonsense that somehow this is all of a sudden a trend for 2025. Manufacturing has been in contraction for literally a couple of years now. Since really the beginning of 2023, the sector has been losing jobs on net. And that's a trend that unfortunately still continues to this day. I think it's probably going to take quite some time before we really see all of the pro-growth policies that are being put in place now really bear fruit. And again, turn that trend around, stop the hemorrhaging, and then produce job gains instead of job losses. But again, the idea that somehow 2025 is the first time since the pandemic, I should say, that we've been losing blue collar jobs, it's nonsense. Everyone can see on the screen there the fact that the trend has been down, and it has been down since literally the start of 2023. So it's almost 3 years old now.
Quick exit question. Do you see the blue collar jobs turning around in 2026 with the new tax bill?
I do, because not only of the pro-growth measures within that tax bill, Brian, but also because I think the administration is fine-tuning their tariff strategy,
Ah,
regardless of what the Supreme Court does. And I think that's going to be very, very beneficial for consumers and workers alike.
okay, EJ and Tony bringing us the economic history, debunking the myths. We appreciate it. Happy Thanksgiving, sir. Good to see you.
So he's not necessarily a fan of the $2,000 tariff dividend stimulus checks. Instead, he believes that tax cuts and just paying down the national debt would be the option, would be the best option. Now, it'll be interesting to see whether Republicans follow in line with what Trump wants here with these $2,000 checks, or if they'll also follow in line with what he is saying there by instead just using this extra revenue to just pay down the debt. Now, at the end of the day, the Supreme Court might actually strike down these tariffs that have been taking place. They might say that it was illegal, that Trump should not have been able to do this, and the tariff revenue may not be there anyways for a $2,000 tariff dividend check. It'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out. But once again, leave your thoughts and comments below. Are you for or are you against these $2,000 checks? Leave your thoughts and comments below. But that's all I have for today's video, and I will see you in the next one.